Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme.
Congress wants to know what caused the Enron meltdown.
Now, while the collective rage currently is focused on WorldCom,
Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski was convicted of looting hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Find out more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
A small fashion boutique is not usually the first suspect when you are looking for the next big multinational conglomerate to fall to accounting fraud. That's what makes the story of Peck International out of the United Kingdom one of the most shocking rises and falls in corporate history. As the company was morphed from a small fashion house into a holding company that had its fingers dug into businesses from electronics to fruit, people were astounded by the ability for the company to maintain great profit figures. And all the praise was heaped upon its enigmatic CEO, Asil Nadir. But as the story has gone many times on this podcast, the rapid expansion mindset of the 1980s was usually a cover for a large nothing burger on the balance sheet. And when everything began unraveling for the once textile company, Asil was left deciding to weather the storm or whether to up and run. All of this Cinderella story turned crime drama and more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
I've never heard it. This was only in the UK, Peck?
No, they did have subsidiaries here in America, but it was like a textile company, so it's not really. It's more. It had more of a fallout on the UK than it did America, but this is one of the UK's largest corporate failures in their history.
I feel like we don't have the boutiques of the women's boutiques that we had back when we were growing up. Like you had Fashion Bug. I think Talbot's is still a thing.
Forever 21.
We still have that.
Rue
no
21.
more Rue 21. No more Charlotte Russe. No more. What was that one? It was like dingy. Wet Seal.
Ew. Believe it or not, I know I said two as a joke. I don't know any of these. It's not really my.
Your mom knows all of them.
Maybe. No, are you kidding me? We went shopping at the Walmart. That's where I got all my clothes until I turned like 21.
That's fair.
Legitimately. And now I get Goodfellow from Target. I have not grown, and I apologize for that, anyone who cares about fashion. Anyway, looking very dapper in...
Well, I can't say anything. I got this from the thrift store.
In a college hoodie and a trucker hat today, my name is Kashan.
And I'm Nina. Yeah, actually, Kashan, I think we should change this to a fashion podcast.
Please, no.
It's his specialty.
If we wanted to talk about things that we weren't qualified to talk about, Nina, we'd talk about white-collar crime.
I was going to say I would be talking about white-collar crime.
Anyway, white-collar crime. But yeah, today we're talking about Peck International, which started out as Peck, which is a hilarious name for a company that really fucked up big time.
It sounds like I just think of Polly Pocket.
I was gonna say It sounds like a children's toy.
It does. Yeah, well, Polly Pocket.
Like,
yeah.
And the hottest toy this winter, grab your kids the Peck from a Target near you. Yeah.
I thought you meant like attractive when you said hot, and I was like, wait, why is she hot? And then I realized what you meant.
No, that's you, Nina. That's you in your mind.
I was like, that probably would be Bratz dolls, but...
we're not going into this. This is... Stop trying to derail this. Stop trying to derail this.
Kidding.
To keep on track, Asil Nadir was born on the island of Cyprus in 1941 when the country was still just a British colony. The origin of many countries, as it were. His father was a businessman and a police constable, and he taught young Asil to be entrepreneurial.
Is a constable just like a policeman?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And there is a tale that Asil was even hawking newspapers on the street at the young age of 6, showing that he was a true businessman.
What's the thing they would always yell?
Extra, extra.
That's what it was. Extra, extra. Read all about it.
Read all about it. Cyprus, still a British territory. Fish and chips, still popular. Yeah.
Oh, fish and chips is awful.
And although Asil spent most of his childhood in the Turkish-speaking town of Famagusta, his father moved the family to London in the 1950s to expand his clothing business. That's what his father did. Asil's family was of Turkish descent, and we're not going to get as much of a backstory on this country as we did a couple weeks ago about Turkey, but just there's been a lot of dispute and fighting on the island of Cyprus between its split residents that are mainly of Greek and Turkish descent. But since Asil was of the latter, when he decided to go to study, he went to Turkey and he studied economics at Istanbul University. And shortly after graduating, he started his own clothing business in the footsteps of his father. Things really took off for him in 1974 when that conflict between Greek and Turkish Cypriots, that's what people from Cyprus are called.
Oh, I didn't know that. Cypriot.
Culminated in Turkey invading the island and annexing the northern part of the country, creating the de facto country of Northern Cyprus, which is only officially recognized by Turkey.
I was going to say, I don't know if I've ever seen that on a map, but only Turkey recognizes that?
Yeah, so technically it's the Republic of Cyprus, but the north part is, like, according to every other country, is part of Cyprus, but the north part, according to them and Turkey, is not affiliated with them at all. Like, the Cyprus government has, like, seats set aside for, like, the Turkish Cypriots, and they've just been, like, vacant since 1968 because they're like, no, we have our own country.
Oh my God.
Yeah, very weird situation. And this conflict still ongoing. So
Interesting. Is it kind of like, I don't know if you know, but like, are they actually fighting, or is it just kind of like a social beef?
I don't think there's a lot of actual fighting anymore. There was actual fighting for a long time. Like, the UN had like a big like buffer zone between them. There's a big wall that was up, like in like the Berlin Wall between the two of them, or between like South and North Korea. So I don't know now. I just knew up until like 2012, and I don't know when all that happened. I briefly read like the Wikipedia page on it. So
fair.
Yeah, if you guys know,
let us know.
Yeah, feel free to let us know in the comments. But a part of this annexation of northern Cyprus was the displacement of most of those Greek Cypriots from that region into what became the Republic of Cyprus. And that actually allowed Asil Nadir to take control of a vacated textile business that was owned by a Greek citizen at the time in one of the largest cities in Cyprus, their capital, Nicosia. And with this new business, he ramped up exports to the Middle East, which saw his biggest influx of capital of his career at the time, which allowed him to purchase a stake in Peck.
Ah.
So Peck was a fashion house founded in the 1940s by a husband and wife duo, where the wife would design the clothing that was sold, and the husband would kind of control the day-to-day business operations. But in the late 1970s, Peck was struggling to stay afloat. So when a company came by owned by Nadir, who he was making clothes primarily, and he offered to buy a controlling stake in the company for £270,000, the husband and wife jumped at the offer, and then they sold their majority stake. In 1980, Asil Nadir was placed as the CEO of the company, and then did a round of fundraising to raise £1.5 million in the UK to go on a shopping spree that even London Tipton would be envious of.
She does love to shop.
She does love to shop, and so did Asil Nadir. The only difference is that Nadir was buying companies. London Tipton probably was too. I mean,
yeah, let's be real.
She was uber wealthy.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
she was definitely.
Yeah,
her father owned the Tipton Hotel.
The Tipton hotels. There was a Tipton in every. This is such a deep cut reference. Hopefully, the people that listen to this are from our age gap.
Yeah, our age gap group.
Gap group, whatever.
Okay.
And they understand the sweet life of Zach and Cody. So Peck was set up as a central hub for his businesses, and they stopped acting primarily as a clothing business at all, and instead functioned as a holding company for all of the other companies that Asil Nadir would go on to purchase. With many of these new acquisitions being incorporated in his homeland of northern Cyprus, which is kind of weird because it's kind of like an isolated community. Obviously, it is literally a country that most people don't call a country. So it was really interesting that he was opening a lot of businesses there, because not many places did business with northern Cyprus. In fact, if they required Turkey for all of their, like, military, for a lot of their like national dealings, it had to go through Turkey instead because people actually recognized Turkey as a country.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was an excess of citrus fruit being grown in the region. I guess a lot of oranges, lemons, what have you.
Hey, aren't they like right on the Mediterranean? So
they are.
They're
like the third largest island in the Mediterranean.
So they're growing a lot of stuff. It's nice there.
So they have a lot of citrus. And Nadir made a big investment into this, buying 3 companies related to the growing and packaging of citrus fruit in 1982.
Interesting.
In northern Cyprus, which is, maybe an odd choice for expansion for a man who largely dealt in clothing up to this point and didn't really expand past that.
He's just like, I know I like to eat fruit, so let me buy some of it.
He's like,
let me control some of it.
You guys heard about Apple? Well, I want to be a fruit company too. I didn't do any research on it, but I'm just assuming that that's what they do, and they're doing all right.
They sell apples, right?
So get me some fruit. That same year, Nadir used Polypeck as a vehicle to purchase luxury real estate as well, in the forms of hotels and resorts, once again, mostly in Turkey and northern Cyprus. He also started a bottled water company in Turkey.
What year was this?
This was I think he started the bottled water company in 1982 as well.
They were selling bottled water back then? Apparently.
I guess so. But that was the Nixar Mineral Water Company, which did relatively well. I guess they sold over 100 million bottles during their tenure throughout the Middle East.
That sounds like good numbers.
So, but it's just kind of weird what he was choosing. Like, it's a lot of things.
Yeah, it's not really, nothing's really just one thing. He's got his fingers in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, which is, it was kind of a thing of the 80s that they would do this. Mm-hmm. But I think most people realize that this is a bad business plan. Mm-hmm. So, and spoiler alert, it doesn't turn out well.
What?
I know, right? In 1983, Nadir shifted his focus back onto his bread and butter of textiles, picking up majority holdings in large textile manufacturers, Santana Incorporated here in the U.S., and Intercity in the U.K., while also picking up a few more majority stakes in publicly held textile companies throughout the Middle East and even Eastern Asia. Picked one up in like the United Arab Emirates, and then one I think was somewhere in like Southeast Asia, maybe China, but I don't remember. But textile companies. And then in 1984, Nadir made one of the most interesting choices when Polypeck acquired 82% of Vestel Electronics. At the time, Vestel was one of the largest publicly traded companies in Turkey and primarily dealt in the production of budget electronics and appliances, primarily televisions, but washer dryers, ovens, phones, Betamax players.
What's that?
Thank you for asking, Nina. So I
don't know what that is.
This is only because I watch stupid like YouTube videos about like outdated technology a lot because I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
Betamax was a competitor to the VHS tape.
Okay.
So it was like a slightly bigger VHS tape.
Oh, that makes sense because the VHS tapes weren't very big to begin with.
No,
so.
I think it could hold more, maybe had better quality. But they did a lot, and believe it or not, Vestel Electronics still holds a large market share in Europe. And they manufacture televisions that are sold under popular brands such as Toshiba and Hitachi, as well as their own brands. But they still make stuff today. And after this large acquisition, Asil Nadir decided to take Polypeck public. Getting a lot of P's there in a row.
Polypeck public.
Polypeck, that's my next.
Say that 5 times.
Yeah, that's my next vocal warm-up. They became an LLC in 1985, and then he changed the name to Polypeck International, or PPI. And with the influx of capital that came from the IPO, he continued this streak of violent expansion that was so characteristic of business at the time, like I mentioned. He picked up more textile businesses, but also a fruit company. He kept going on the fruit.
People like fruit.
I guess so, but I guess backed by their expansion into the Turkish citrus business, Polypeck International decided it would be a good idea to buy the European arm of the Del Monte canned fruit division in 1989.
Really?
Which you may know the company that makes that like delicious syrupy fruit
I know.
cocktail.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh man, I ate that so much as a kid because it's basically candy.
I've never eaten one.
Ever?
I don't think so.
Wild.
My mom wouldn't let me eat them.
Well, you can't have it now because it's got so much high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, and it kind of like, it looks gross to me. It reminds me of like Jell-O with like fruit in it. That's what it looks like to me. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but it's not like that. But yeah,
It's not like that.
No,
That's what it looks like to me.
It's basically fruit covered in corn syrup to like preserve it.
I mean, I'm sure it's delicious.
So it's extremely sweet. I don't think I could eat it now. But they have that. You've seen Del Monte. It's got like
I
the
know
red
what it looks
brand.
like,
It's
yeah.
a very popular.
I know exactly what Del Monte is. I just have never eaten it.
Well, they bought the European fruit company division, or like fruit division of the company.
That's so fucking random.
Yes. In addition to fruit, Polypeck International also continued down the path of electronics as well that same year, scooping up large Japanese electronics manufacturer Sansui, which primarily manufactured audio equipment. With these two additions, Polypeck International became one of the highest valued publicly traded companies in the UK, as they were admitted to the FTSE 100, also known as the FTSE, I guess.
I don't like that.
Colloquially.
I don't like that.
And
that game that we always played with, or that our brother's friends always tried to play with us when they came over to visit.
My brother's friends never
played
tried to
footsie with you?
me. Yeah.
You want to play footsie right now?
Please, get those fucking grippers off me. You're disgusting. You know I hate feet.
I know you hate feet.
Anyway, the FTSE 100, get out of here. It was comparable to the S&P 500 here in the States. It's the 100 most valued companies on the biggest UK index. Asyl had taken a company that was once valued at only £300,000 all the way up to £1.7 billion at its peak.
How?
But by buying all these companies, they just ingested companies. Okay. And 1.7 billion, by the way, is about 4.4 billion pounds now, adjusted for inflation.
Wow.
So pretty good. And they were the proud owner of over 200 companies worldwide. And they were the single largest employer in North Cyprus.
That's crazy.
So they got big. And this is literally from 1982 to 1989. So 7 years they got this big.
Wow.
Like, just buying
up whatever they wanted. Just buying up anything they could get their grubby little hands on.
But primarily clothing, fruit, and electronics.
What else do you need?
Maybe he did get fruit and electronics as an Apple. He did the fruit first, and then he realized, oh shit, they sell electronics.
He's like, oh, you know what makes more money than fruit? Electronics.
They do electronics? We'll just have to get that now as well, but we're not getting rid of anything else. And then, though, the first off-putting thing happened, as in 1990, at the height of business, Asyl Nadir announced publicly that he was attempting to buy back shares to take the company private again. An unprecedented move that was later retracted by him. It would have required a personal investment of like billions of dollars.
Can you, I mean, I get you're legally allowed to do that once you go public, you can then go back to private?
Yeah, of course, you just have to buy all your shares back.
That seems like a lot. That seems expensive.
It's also weird to do for a company that is performing really well.
Right.
Like, I mean, sometimes they want to do it to be like, well, we just want to go back to having all this money internally instead of dealing with stakeholders to like make things more efficient. But it was kind of weird for them to do it at this time. And it was one of the first glimpses under the curtain at the company that looked great to investors, but was closer to collapse than anyone expected. So outwardly, Asyl Nadir lived the life of a compassionate millionaire. He was a strong supporter of the Conservative Party in Britain, both financially and publicly. He palled around with a lot of prominent conservative political party members. And he was noted as giving heavily to charities as well as to political groups. He lived in a big mansion where he kept livestock, including sheep, cattle, and horses. He collected antique French furniture, and he played the violin. He drove luxury cars, and he was just kind of like a basic, boring, run-of-the-mill, ultra-wealthy guy.
Boring? He plays the violin.
And he just did the rich guy stuff. He didn't do anything interesting. He's just
he did do rich guy stuff.
It's like, what do you think rich guys have? It's like, oh, they probably got a big house. They probably drive nice cars. They probably
have sheep.
They probably like horses or some shit. It's exactly what he did.
Yeah, he was not Hey, listen, he was what's the word I want to say? He was predictable.
He is very predictable. Well, I said he's basic. He's basic.
Yeah.
He's like the PSL drinker of rich guys.
Yeah.
You know? He's just the same thing. And these kinds of men, obviously, predictably, love control, which is maybe why he assumed so much control over the financial dealings of Polly Peck. Although there was obviously a board of directors and a slew of shareholders for the company, Asil Nadir had a vice grip on the money that could be transferred out of their bank accounts. An investigation by an accounting disciplinary tribunal found that between 1988 and 1989, Asil Nadir had funneled 199 million pounds out of their accounts through 88 deals to their subsidiaries in Turkey and Northern Cyprus.
Whoa.
And this was done without the knowledge of the board, or at least without their approval, because Polly Peck had allowed Nadir to move money around accounts without the signature of another director on the request for the transfers. A practice that is common in many businesses to prevent this exact kind of fraud. So that one person can't just pull out a bunch of money.
Yeah, you can't just do whatever you want.
And he kind of did do whatever he wants. And in 1990, the board became fully aware of these transactions and actually approached Nadir and were like, you gotta like bring the money back from overseas.
Yeah.
Like, this is a crazy amount of money to be funneling out. And he just kind of said, nah.
He's like, no, I would rather not.
He's like, nah, you know what? You make an interesting case, but I think I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah, no.
It's like, oh, bring the money back? Nah. That's okay. I have better things to do. And it turns out that a lot of the money that was being sent to Northern Cyprus was not actually ending up in ventures tied to Polly Peck at all, but rather to Nadir personally or his close friends and family. Later investigations conducted by the Serious Fraud Office alleged that Nadir moved $150 million through bank accounts overseas.
Wow.
And even through some banks controlled by Nadir himself in Cyprus into accounts that were owned directly by him. He also funneled money into companies held by his associates like his son Birol. Like, I guess he bankrolled a company using money he took from Polly Peck in Northern Cyprus. The Serious Fraud Office also found that some assets, mostly real estate, as far as I can tell, that were supposed to be property of Polly Peck International, had actually just been registered under Asil Nadir's name directly instead, which he told people that he was holding on trust for Polly Peck International, which is most likely just
absolutely
a crock of horse shit.
That's not true at all.
It's because like Northern Cyprus is so detached that it was hard to like understand the dealings that were going on there in the UK, so he could just like put stuff under his name and no one would ever know. And it's not like you can do anything about it.
Right, you can't do anything.
It's literally in a country that no one says is a country. It's the Wild West. A lot of money that he was taking out was kind of going back to Polly Peck International, though, as he was using shell companies to actually buy stock in the company, which was secretly growing his 25% stake he had in the company without reporting it to other shareholders, and also falsely inflating their stock price because he's buying a bunch of it.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, hey, good for Nadir, though, because the general health of the business also wasn't great. So he kind of needed to prop up their stock price by doing this. No company can survive this kind of like absolute thievery that was going on by Asil, but their strong profit was also fabricated. So looking just at the profits of Polly Peck International, they had always remained really strongly in the back on their profit loss sheet. Like, it looks like they were bringing in a lot of money from their investments. But it wasn't real per se.
Yeah.
So the main company, Polly Peck International, was loaning money to its businesses overseas. So basically how it works is Polly Peck International is a hub, and they have these subsidiary companies in other countries. So how does that subsidiary company get funding? They take a loan from their holding company. So Polly Peck International gives them a loan for an amount of money, and then they request interest on it. And then that subsidiary invests in whatever venture fruit, whatever, that they're investing in, and then they get the return, and then Polly Peck gets paid back that interest on the loan.
Okay.
So that's how this company makes money, and the main hub, Polypeck, makes money.
Got you.
So they're sending these over into Turkey, northern Cyprus, so they can invest in these operations. And the loans from Polypeck International were in pounds, but the investments were largely done in Turkish lira.
Okay.
So their return on the subsidiaries' investments here were always strong percent-wise. Let's say they're getting 25% return on investment. So they only have to pay 5% back on the loan. So that looks like a pretty strong profit. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that they were investing it in a quote unquote weaker currency.
Yeah.
So the Turkish lira was becoming weaker compared to the pound. So although the investments were still making money, even if the exchange rate changed, the profit loss statement would show that, but the principal investment, the original amount that they put in, was decreasing in value constantly over time. Mm-hmm. So if you just looked at the profit loss, it looked like they were making fine money. But really, they were losing a bunch of money on the principal investment, which was harder to tell from people who were looking to invest in the company.
Yeah.
And for you and for anyone else to break this down a little bit more, let's say you gave me $10 on loan under the assumption that I'd pay you back 10% interest or $1 on the $10 you gave me. I go to the closest neighbor, Mexico, and initially they tell me I can swap out the $10 directly for 10 pesos. And then I invest those 10 pesos into tequila business, and then they pay me back 25% return on investment. So I get 2.5 pesos back as profit. Mm-hmm. And then I can pay the interest of $1 to you and then still keep a profit for myself of 1.5.
Okay.
Now, let's say that after I make that initial investment, though, and we're getting money back from it, the exchange rate of pesos to dollars, it's now 1.25 pesos per every dollar. Mm-hmm. So that means when I get the money back and I exchange it back to you, I technically would break even.
Yeah.
Because now I have to give you back all the 2.5 pesos. So, but I'm still not in the red. Like, I'm still not losing money. So It got worse, but if the exchange rate fluctuated less than that, maybe you'd still make profit.
Okay.
But the thing is, the original $10 that I invested is now only worth $8. The original 10 pesos that I invested is now only worth $8. So that principal investment, what I put into the tequila company, is worth less money over time.
Mm. Okay.
You get it?
Yeah, you had me until you said the 8 pesos.
Well, it's worth $8 now. It's the same amount of pesos, but now the peso is worth less.
Okay.
So you've lost $2 there. So although it looks like I broke even on the profit loss, technically we've lost $2 because the initial investment has reduced in value.
Got you.
So sorry, but that was part of it, is that in the price of the Turkish lira was not great over the 1980s. Yeah. So this was happening in basically all of their investments in Turkey. It looks like they were making money, but in reality, they were not. They were losing a lot of their initial investments. In September of 1990, the offices of Polypeck International were raided by the Serious Fraud Office. And
it doesn't sound serious.
The Serious Fraud Office.
This is a serious fraud office.
Well, it's the Brits, man. They got weird words for shit, okay?
They do.
This is just the SEC, but of Britain. So
yeah.
And people started wildly selling off their shares in Polypeck International, and to the point that trading was suspended that very same day.
Wow.
Like later that afternoon, they suspended trading. So looking under the hood financially showed that most of the acquisitions that they had done over the course of the decade were also funded primarily with debt, which was also backed by Polypeck International stock, which was now worthless, basically. So, overburdened with debt and no liquidity to pay back banks that were now flooding them with margin calls, Polypeck International was liquidated and bankrupt by the end of October. So, one more month in 1990. Asil Nadir was arrested and was slapped with 70 charges of false accounting and theft, and was released under a £3.5 million bail.
Wow. That's a big bail.
He's a rich guy.
Yeah.
So because of the complication in building cases of this nature, which usually requires a lot of tediousness, looking over papers, making flow diagrams for how money was moved, the trial was still not concluded 3 years later in 1993. And there was an oversight on the government's end, and they actually let Asil Nadir's bail lapse.
Oops.
Which means that he technically was no longer required to abide by any of the conditions set forth by it. And it just so happens that the detectives set to watch him were also off on a bank holiday, so the police force could save some money. They let them not do their guarding him job that day. So he got a pilot friend of his to fly him out of London that very same day.
Oh my God.
And he was taken to northern Cyprus. Of course, the pilot was not just acting on good intentions, though, as Asil promised him a hefty portion of an airplane-related business in northern Cyprus if he took him there.
Yeah.
And Cyprus, believe it or not, does not have an extradition treaty with the UK.
Even though the UK owned it?
Yep.
Interesting.
They don't have an extradition treaty with them. So they had no way of actually getting him back once he was there.
Yeah.
Also, he was in northern Cyprus, so even if the Republic of Cyprus wanted to do something, I don't think
they couldn't because
they
it's
can't go in there.
technically Turkey's.
Yeah, because they don't acknowledge that Republic of Cyprus even controls or owns them. So they did have a way of getting the pilot, however, though, as he was arrested and convicted of charges relating to assisting the escape of a fugitive.
Yeah.
However, after spending 1 year in prison, his conviction was overturned because technically Nadir was not on bail when the pilot flew him out. So he technically didn't do anything wrong, but he still served a year in prison nonetheless. Nadir, however, stayed in Cyprus for 17 years after this. And there was nothing that the UK could do to bring him back to face the music. And he lived in luxury. He stayed at one of the hotels that he owned, likely bought with money from Polly Peck International directly. And he got to keep operating and profiting off of most of the businesses in northern Cyprus and Turkey because of its isolation from the rest of the world. Like, what was someone in the UK going to be like, well, we liquidated Polly Peck and we technically own this now?
No,
they can't.
They can't do that.
So he just kept running all the businesses himself, but now from North Cyprus. He also was doing pretty well in the personal department, as in 2005, he married a woman that worked at a newspaper he ran. Her name is Nur. And she is 43 years younger than him.
That is disgusting.
Yes.
That is so gross.
I don't know how old she was, but she looked like she was in her 20s.
Yeah, probably.
Least. I mean, he's 83 now, and this was like 11 years ago, so he was 72, so 46.
That's like Bill Belichick and his girlfriend.
He was like early 30s. Yeah, it's gross.
So gross. She's like 24 and he's like 70-something.
It's grody, but yeah. And speaking of this newspaper, by the way, it's kind of topical to what I talked about in the 2013 corruption scandal episode, because his Turkish language and English language newspapers that he ran were actually subject to surprise audit by the Tayyip Erdogan government because they were critical of the AKP. They were supportive of the opposition party.
Interesting.
So they showed up one day and they were like, we audited you. You owe us 11 million Turkish lira by tomorrow, which was like 6 million pounds at the time. It's like, and they were like, you owe this tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So
not tomorrow.
In 2010, though, Nadir made a surprising decision. He had stated publicly that he would be willing to return to the UK of his own volition to face trial if they promised that he would not be jailed during the proceedings, that he would be released on bail for the time and he would not have to be in prison. And when a British judge announced that they did in fact offer him bail, he returned to the UK in August of that year in 2010 to face trial. And he was not put in jail. He instead needed to turn over his passport, report to a police station once a week, wear an electronic tag that tracked his movements at all times, and he had to remain in his home overnight from like 10
he's like
p.m.
in
to
his
6 a.m.
70s, so that doesn't even matter.
How is he going to go clubbing with his like 30-year-old girlfriend,
He's
dude?
probably not going clubbing with her.
He can go and, pass out in the VIP section.
He just buys the
drunk.
table.
So while his trial was ongoing, which took 2 years, he stayed in a lavish house that literally cost £20,000 a month to rent and would drive a Jaguar to his court proceedings. And after the 2 years, in August of 2012, Asil Nadir was found guilty on 10 of the original 70 counts of the theft of £29 million of the originally alleged £146 million that they said he stole. He was subsequently sentenced to 10 years in prison, which he was in his 70s.
Yeah, he's old as fuck. That's crazy.
Or I guess late 60s at the time. No,
he's old.
He was newly in his 70s, but yes,
very
he's
old.
Of course, it would not be an episode of White Collars, Red Hands if he actually served that in its entirety.
Yeah.
Because in 2016, British taxpayers had started to become upset at the amount of foreign prisoners that were being paid for by them. So they started a movement to move these prisoners back to their countries of origin instead of jailing them in the UK. And at this point, Asil had paid back his fees to the legal aid agency and also paid a $5 million restitution that he was supposed to pay, or £5 million restitution, which is low, but whatever. And he was ordered to pay, or he paid everything off, so they transferred him back to Turkey to serve his sentence there. However, upon being transported to Turkey, he was held for a single day, and then they let him go. So he was in prison for just about 4 years out of the 10.
Damn.
And then Turkey was just like, yeah, go.
All right, just go.
And since then, he's been able to operate his business empire to this day, still with his much younger wife, Nur.
He's still alive?
He's 83, yeah.
Wow.
Asil Nadir is one more story in a long line of companies that thought rapid expansion would cause them to be the Roman Empire of corporations. And in a way, he was right. Because although they reached a high, it was only temporary before a notable collapse. Peck was an Enron-type moment for the UK that taught our friends across the pond that there needs to be more oversight over those at the very top of companies, that letting them run wild without checks and balances often leads to abuse. Asil Nadir deserves some, very little, but some, credit for returning to face the music in trial. It took 17 years, but justice was finally kind of served, once again, temporarily. And once again, the story remains the same. These people do not get the punishment they deserve, and they live lavishly even after they are caught red-handed. May we learn from our mistakes so that we don't repeat them. We've already done it a bunch, so
they always do it.
We'll see.
They always do it.
We'll see about that. So yeah, that was the story of Peck, one of the largest corporate collapses in the UK history, and we got through it without doing one British accent.
Wow, look at us.
So
that was an accomplishment.
We're growing as podcasters.
We are.
We're not taking the low-hanging fruit anymore, okay?
I've grabbed the low-hanging fruit more than once.
No, Nina, you weren't supposed to. You weren't supposed to. Oh, God. Okay, maybe we haven't grown that much. Anyway, would you like to see us grow?
Growers, not showers.
Would you? If you'd like to support the podcast, please leave us a review. Please leave us a review and leave all of this part out. Just hype us up, please.
Please. I'm feeling low.
You can write a review with words if you want on Apple Podcasts, or just leave a star review over on Spotify. And then if you're not on those, you're a little rebel, you're a contrarian, you're using something else. Good for you, but follow, share, whatever you want to do on your podcatcher of choice. That helps support the show. If you want to support us on other websites, you can do that. You can find our videos at Spotify, as I mentioned, or you can find them on YouTube at White Collars, Red Hands, and you can also reach out at any of our any of our DMs on any one of our social medias. That's going to be Facebook.com/White Collars, Red Hands, Instagram at White Collars_Red Hands, Twitter at White Collars Pod. TikTok, that's going to be White Collars, Red Hands. If you want to suggest an episode and you don't want to DM us and you still just want to send an email, we have an email. That's whitecollarsredhands@gmail.com. Or you can go to our website, whitecollarsredhands.com, and contact us through there. And hey, while you're there, hit that button that says, check out the merch. Buy a hat, a shirt, a sweater to keep you warm in this La Nina winter that's coming up. Also, tell a friend. Tell a friend. Get it out by words of mouth. That always helps us, I think I've already done the thing about you could cut all the letters out of a magazine. I'm trying to give more unhinged ways that you can recommend our podcast to people. Tie a note to a rock and throw it through a congressman's window.
Okay. That is one way to do it.
Yeah. It would get people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. Don't do that. Or do, but don't.
Please don't.
Or do, but don't. All right. You can also... There was one more that I wanted to say. What was it? If you want to recommend an episode, please do. We do one Fancy Minute episode every single season. So yours could be the next, and we gotta get Nina out of here. She's
Sorry,
fading.
guys. I took a Benadryl.
She's fading, and she's fading fast. So we'll wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next week on another episode of White Collars,
Red Hands.